Hello and welcome to Slow Stitch Sunday, episode 6 here at Bluebell Crafts. Today I want to stitch a fun little fabric scraps collage with you and incorporate a new embroidery stitch as a feature, the Vandyke stitch. I've put together just a handful of fabric scraps. This is from a charm pack, and this is going to be my background and feature fabric. I'm just going to tear this to size. And this little piece of linen has a fabric transfer on it, and I've done a separate tutorial on how to do this, and I shall link it above for you. These are great for card making, journaling. You can add them to clothing, so there's loads of creative possibilities with these. To make this stand out a little bit more, I'm going to add some of this raspberry coloured background. And I'm going to add a strip of this, I don't know if you can see the texture, really gorgeous old cotton. It was actually part of a tablecloth from my grandma. Once your collage is prepped, you can use applique pins or a glue stick. This is a bit makeshift because the actual glue pen is in the office, and this is a refill which is still working, but you just have to use it like this. Just adding a few little dabs, and then to add the background fabric I will use a few pins, I think. So I hope you've got a coffee or cup of tea on standby, and you've got time to settle in for some stitching. If not, and you just want to see how the Vandyke stitch works, then you can use the chapters at the bottom of the screen, and you can jump straight ahead if you prefer. The threads I'm using, as always, are by Aurifil, from these two thread collections that Aurifil kindly sent to me when I started the Slow Stitch Sunday series. They are 8 weight and perfect for embroidery and hand quilting and a lot more. I'm just warming up, so to speak, by adding a few running stitches to these patches up here. Note to myself not to put hand cream on just before I'm starting to stitch, because it makes it a little bit harder to grip the needle. And I just want to say thank you to the various messages that I've had about the missing episode last Sunday. Totally my bad. I was actually at the Stitch Festival in London and wasn't organised enough to pre-record and pre-schedule an episode before I went. And the seagulls are back. I don't know if you can hear them via my microphone. As soon as the weather gets a little bit warmer and it's no longer so stormy and rainy, I try and bring you an episode from the beach and record the sound of the waves in the background, and I hope that will make for a very relaxing, even more relaxing I should say, stitching session. I think I'm going to use the blue for the embroidery stitch to make that show up, and as a contrast on here, I'm not sure that works actually with hindsight, I might use some of this raspberry to tie in with that patch. So I always do think a little bit about the composition of my collages, and people often ask how I arrive at certain combinations, but I think it's very intuitive, and to be honest, if you like it, that's all that matters. So sometimes when people say, oh, but it's not beautiful, or I don't know if it goes, I always think if you think it goes, then it goes. It's as simple as that. You're doing this for you, and you are the one to enjoy it, so it doesn't really matter whether you think whether it is Instagrammable or whether other people will like it. And I think the more you practice these little creative exercises, you find the easier it comes to put things together, whether that's pattern with colour or matching different things. And just a tip, if you find it difficult to stitch in a straight line, just to remind myself of the direction, I hold the needle over the previous stitches and then also align it for the next stitches, and that does make it a little bit easier. But again, it is totally okay to stitch wonky or abstract and uneven. It doesn't matter at all. It's what you want to get out of this. It's time for our feature stitch, the Vandyke stitch today, and I'm going to stitch a wider version down this strip so that you can see it, and then show you a variation in another little element here, how you can condense it and shape it to fill in the shape of a leaf. So I've added a knot, and you want to come up a little way below the top of your fabric, and then you cross over and make a small stitch, and then you cross over again and stitch on the same height as on the other side. And if you prefer, you can maybe pencil in or use a heat erasable pen just to draw some lines on here as a guide for you if you prefer. So I'm going to take the needle and come up down here, or maybe not quite as far down, and then I'm going through this cross up here. I'm not putting the needle into the fabric, I'm just picking up these two stitches there, and I'm crossing over and going back in here. So this is starting to look like a little braid. Actually, I think it's absolutely beautiful. And you could actually go in with a second colour. Those of you who are knitters, think fair isle knitting, where you swap the thread from the back so that you have actually two separate needles going, and then you just pick up and alternate each needle for each of the stitches, and I think that'll look really good. And just be careful not to tighten this thread too much. You just want it to lie flat without snagging or without, what's the word? Bunching up the fabric underneath. So this is just slightly short, but it doesn't really matter. So I try to come up in a straight line down here. So let me know what you think about this stitch and maybe what applications you might use it for. If you were making these stitches much narrower, it will be really useful, just as the herringbone from last week, for crazy quilting by hand, because you could have the seam of two fabrics underneath in the middle and then stitch either side. If you find that you're snagging threads from underneath, or you're splitting the stitch, splitting the thread up here, when you're trying to get through, you can always use the back of the needle, the blunt end, if you might find this easier. I'm actually running out of thread, so I think I'm going to end the stitch and add a little last loop to it. I've switched to pink, and please excuse me for going off on a little tangent, but I thought I might just add a few little blossoms here. And to stitch a flower, this is going to be the center. You leave a little loop and then you go in at the height that you want the petals to be. And then over that loop, stitch down on the other side. And then you want to add 5 petals that often looks a bit more natural than an even number. And they don't have to be all the same height as well. Again, that might look a little bit more natural than when it's really uniform. And this would actually look like a nice butterfly if you make these two a little bit bigger, and then you could stitch 2 black French knots as the little antennae. But I transgress again, sorry. I've grabbed some yellow thread to add a French knot to the middle of these flowers. And you can tell that the French knot is one of my favourite stitches because I've used it in that episode, that one, and literally just the first one I didn't use it. So it is so versatile and I really love it. You could also add 3 instead of just 1. Let's see how that looks. Actually, I'll do it on the next one and I'll put the first one dead center just to give myself a little bit of room. So let me show you how to stitch a leaf, and I'm going to use my refill here just to add a few dabs just to add these pieces together. For this, I've doubled up my thread, so I've got 2 strands of it, and I'm just going to lightly sketch the outline of a leaf. And I start really close to the top and then make the tiniest of stitches right at the apex. And then instead of going down here, I'm going to stitch across horizontally in parallel to the line above, and I'm sort of filling in the inside of the leaf and then we'll end up with this lovely crossover at the centre of it. So I hope you can see that. So you can see this is actually quite a raised stitch because the thread is on the thicker side. If you are using embroidery floss, then you can maybe split it and use less strands if you prefer. And when I cross over, I'm trying not to get my threads twisted to get a cleaner front. And just make sure you're not pulling this too tight, because otherwise it's going to create a channel on the back. I'm going to grab a new thread, because this does use a fair bit of thread, this version. Okay, that's filled in. And I'm just going to stitch an outline and a little stem if I have enough thread left over. Actually, I'm going to change to a single strand for this. I'm going to use the split back stitch that we used in the second episode for the letters. And you can also tidy up the edges a little bit this way, which is quite handy. So I've gone all the way around, and I'm just going to add a few more stitches in a slight curve. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate all your support for this series and your lovely comments, and I'm really grateful for your time as always. Thank you so much and have a lovely week. Bye bye.